Morning, everybody. Welcome to another fresh mind body medicine class with Dr. Ariel. I'll give everybody just a minute to settle in here. Please say hi if you pop on. Let me know how you're doing. Um, as some of you know, you can catch me every first and third, Monday, Thursday, right here on Promise Resource Network. Um, it's been a busy but productive day for me, so much that I actually forgot about this talk until about 2 hours ago. Thankfully, one of my tasks, you could say, today was therapy, which I believe everyone in the universe needs a therapist, let alone if you have a history of trauma, which a lot of people do, let's face it. So yeah, therapy always gives me some great food for thought and things to talk about for discussion and for reflection. So I'll sort of start with, I guess, the takeaway from today. And my therapist really loves me because I am a completely open book. It takes me a little bit of time to sort of feel them out and open up, but once I do, it's like diarrhea of the mouth. I'll just share everything. And so I also love to teach, though, by kind of sharing my story. And so um, basically, I had the largest audience that I've ever had today of students and interns. There were 4 people in the room. Um, and basically, I'm kind of teaching as I therapize myself. It's a whole unique sort of deal, but it's been really fun and rewarding. But as I'm filling him in, it was a really unique sort of encounter for me personally because he was the only new one. The other interns had spent a lot of time with me over the past several months. So they know me fairly well. But for the first time, I had other people helping me share my story who really knew the intimate details of my traumas and exactly what I had to overcome to get where I am today. Um, and I've never really had that growing up. I lost my mom young, and then I was gaslit by my father to sort of believe that it was all in my head. And my brothers, either fortunately or unfortunately, don't remember a lot. Guys tend to, take, I don't want to say a backseat, but they create a little more of stoicism among themselves, I think, and they don't process it necessarily in the same way. So yeah, I was kind of on my own in processing any of it, but to hear these 2 interns kind of come to my aid and oh yeah, well this happened and she did this, and when this triggers her, her coping mechanism is this, and it's so awesome, and I'm like, okay. Um, and they're just really validating the incredible amount of progress that I have made in this crazy journey that we call life, and really just empowering me through validation and just a lot of gratuitous uh, compliments and whatnot. This is Dobby. He's gotten a lot bigger since y'all saw him last time. Um, but he's just as crazy, don't worry. Um, anyway, so something really finally occurred to me during this encounter as I'm kind of being an observer myself, as they almost take my role to share the story, right? But it occurred to me that I actually agreed with them. I was like, you know what? Yeah, I am like freaking Wonder Woman, for some of this crap, I have completely rebuilt myself and fallen back in love with the magnificent soul that I am. And let me tell you, when you lose that, it takes years to rebuild. Um, but just having that experience is what inspired me to create this topic tonight of really just empowerment, and how we can really walk the walk instead of saying, oh, I'm going to heal, I'm going to read self-help books, right? Well, what does that mean? How do we actually make that into our existence, into our daily habits and way of life, really? So I sort of was allowing my abusers from the past to be an anchor that weighed me down. And I, through this process, through this nitty gritty, raw, hard work, I've taken back the power. I've gotten back my confidence. I should say rebuilt. It doesn't just poof reappear one day, right? But I've built it back up, my self-esteem, and most importantly, my identity, right? Like who I am. I no longer question and sort of feel lost, right? I didn't even feel I had a sense of identity as a doctor because it wasn't quite my soul calling in that way, right? I do believe I'm meant to be a healer, but that can mean so many different types of things, right? Um, so basically, I think one of my favorite poets, Rupi Kaur, wrote, I'm not a victim of my life. What I went through pulled a warrior out of me, and it is my greatest honor to be her. I love that. I have that one up on my mirror. So today's topic is going to be focusing on, yeah, just empowering yourself in your recovery and even in your physical health as well. I always tell my patients, like, you're your own best doctor, whether you're talking to a psychiatrist, your counselor, or your medical doctor. Learn to use your body and your emotions, how you're feeling, as a messenger of needs that may not be being met, so that you can advocate for yourself and your health and well-being. So the first, well, really one of the most powerful things there is, I believe, are words. So that is kind of where I wanted to start this conversation, with the power of our words. We frame our entire existence with our vocabulary, right? Like, what is the most dreaded interview question, at least for a lot of us oversharers, is the simple, tell me about yourself. And that just leaves it super open. You're like, well, do you want to know, like, geographically where I'm from, or like my hobbies, or, there's a million different ways that you can describe yourself, but how are you going to do it? Verbally. You are going to communicate that and use all the beautiful adjectives to describe it, right? Not a lot of us are going to make a vision board that simply is for the purpose of communicating with another person. I mean, that would be a kind of cool gift now that I think about it. Like, maybe I would make a vision board for, like, my future with my husband. I don't know. That could be cool. But no, usually that's not how we communicate. That is not how we express who we, well, I should say, art is often how we express who we are, right? But I think you get what I'm saying. Words matter. And there's an important distinction, which I don't even think I realized until fairly recently, but someone once asked me, do you have a healing vocabulary or one that dwells on ailments? And I'm like, a healing vocabulary? What on earth does that mean? But it's essentially nothing but positive ways to frame your situation. It can really help you to reorient your mind and reframe even the most frightening circumstances that you can find yourself in, if you're able to flip it into somehow a positive, whether you call that a silver lining or what have you. So that got me to thinking, okay, well, how many of us are guilty of using non-problem solving words? And that's a broad category. I did that on purpose. We can speak about things like the need to forgive others, but yet we will go and use language that involves retaliation and resentment. I did this for years and wondered why I couldn't get past it. And so you really have to be consistent with your words and your mindset and your actions. We also say things to ourselves that we would never say to a person that we love. So bearing that in mind as well. And another way I'm thinking about friendship wise, I'm personally a huge fan of self-deprecating humor. I make myself the butt of a lot of jokes. I think it's funny. And no matter what, like, without fail, I always have at least one of my close friends that has to correct me on part of my damn joke in terms of, like, don't say that about yourself, or you're not this or whatever. And it drives me nuts, but I will say they have a point in the sense that, like, literally, I unfortunately am not in reality a space cadet. So, you know. um, but yeah, basically, you don't want to use anything other than a healing positive vocabulary. Anything else tends to be placing blame, being intensely negative, or potentially even not taking accountability. And all of that serves to only reinforce the illness. And illness can mean a physical ailment, but I'm referring to even that, like, non problem solving mentality as its own form of illness, maybe like just being in that negative thought pattern, if you will. So, really, just I want to encourage you to try to reflect on the quality of the words that you use, but also on the actions that you are performing in response. They have to be consistent. You cannot say that you want something on this conscious level when your subconscious is not ready for it. I was actually kind of called out on this um, by a tarot card reader or psychic healer, however you want to label that woo woo stuff that we all love secretly. Not secretly, I love it. It's cool. But she called me out on basically saying that I wanted something, and I'm like, well, I don't think that XYZ has happened because I haven't taken ABC steps to like to make it ready for the universe. I'm waiting for the universe to come and like tell me like I'm surrendering. And she's like, no, no, no. Like, you are the one with the barrier to this. The universe is not at all stopping you. This is the universe is waiting on you to direct it, for you to make up your mind. And the truth was, I didn't have to do task A, B, C that I thought I did for my desired outcome at all. I had to basically reframe that entire thing into like, what can I take from this? How am I going to learn from this? Um, and so, yeah, learning to not have barriers to yourself. Like, I can't do this. I should do this. Can either hear, right? And so, going back to the power of words, a really great way to illustrate it, I think, in terms of the extent to which they can affect, humans. Um, think about how much scar tissue we have, whether um, literal or metaphorical, but how much scar tissue do we have from one single word that another person used, that for some reason, either it's at the front of our mind or even just buried way, way, way deep, but we can't get over it. I am certain that each of us has at least a couple things that instantly come to mind. If you're feeling brave, please feel free to share. Um, I will go ahead and share a personal story from me. Basically, I have this one really vivid memory of childhood. I was maybe 7 years old, 8, and we were visiting Smith Mountain Lake, and we stopped at a gas station. And my dad is outside pumping the gas. I go in by myself to get my candy, whatever I was doing. But almost immediately upon walking in, and I can't really remember what I was wearing. It was definitely like just athletic lakeish wear type stuff. I had shoes on. But anyway, I walk in, and like over my right shoulder, I hear this older teenage boy go, "Hey, look at her." And I was like, "What?" And I turn around and realize he's pointing at me. And I'm like looking like, do I have something on me? Like, is there toilet paper on my shoe? Like, what in the world? And I was genuinely confused. And he's looking at me dead in the eye the entire time that this is happening. Um, and I'm like in shock, just standing there, like awkwardly staring at this dude. But don't worry, his younger sister made it better. She was like 4, who came over and then echoed the same thing, like, look at her. And I'm like, what in the world? And I was honestly in that moment so ashamed to even ask my father what they could have meant by that. And as a result, I spent a lot of my childhood with social anxiety, like wondering if people were looking at me or talking about me. It was a very bizarre thing, but I carried it with me. It can be, something like being bullied, whatever. But um, yeah, and then so there's that sad story. So I'll tell you a funnier one on a lighter note. There was another time when I was in Belgium. I was studying abroad and traveling to Belgium, and I was in the shop and I'm like looking at souvenirs like keychains. And the shop owner comes over to me, and I was wearing like a baggy sweater. And he comes over to me, puts his hand on my stomach, and goes, "Baby." I was like floored. And the hilarious part is that that is not the first time that has happened to me. And I have a lot of friends, which, like, yes, I have irritable bowel syndrome. It sucks. I bloat sometimes and I look a little prego. What? I don't care. Um, but yeah, basically, it's never okay to ask a woman if she's pregnant until she's crowning, like until that baby's head is coming out of her vagina. You should not ask someone if they're pregnant. Like it's just so wrong on so many levels. And don't touch the belly either. It was so weird. Yeah, sorry, random aside. But it was funny in hindsight because I was fortunately I had overcome my eating disorder by that point. And so fortunately I was kind of like, I look good, but I should probably not drink so much beer. Anyway, so chronic stomach issues, though, are very common in trauma survivors and those with anxiety. So, random fun fact for you. So we talked about the power behind words, but conversely, on the flip side, there's also a power in the absence of a word, such as being told that you're loved growing up, right? That's huge. And how do we even know each other if not for the exchange of words, right? So there was even a time, and I sort of remember this. I think this time was over by like 1990 when I was born, but there was a time in society when giving your word to someone was enough to seal a contract or even a lifelong partnership. Literally just giving your word. Now, we have to hire lawyers like my husband who get paid to go to court and yell at people and make them sign documents. Just kidding. I respect him a lot and he's a great attorney. But you see what I mean? Like we're a very litigious society these days and it's all very official and there's so much protocol and red tape and all that stuff because we humans can be deceitful, right? We have free will and sometimes we don't always make the right choices. So beyond the simple words, I want to draw your attention inward, focus your attention inward, and think about what words have authority over you. I'm just no good at this. It won't work. What self-defeating things do you tell yourself? Because the reality is that that doubt is going to kill infinitely more dreams than failure ever will. I posted that on my social media today, so it's not my quote. But how about other things that people say about you? So I should say what other people say about you, their words, right? Things that they have said. I was labeled as so many problematic things by my stepmother growing up that I actually began to believe them myself. And that's why I always tell people like parents have to be very careful with how they speak to a child because that becomes their inner voice. There were genuinely times where I was like, could this actually be true? And anyone who knows me it just doesn't even think twice because they almost think it's a joke. And I'm like, no, like they really think that. I was really told that. I really believed that. And yeah, you can just ask my husband about how angry he gets when he like, thinks about that. But yeah, thinking about the words that have authority over you. The most important ones are your own words, what you tell yourself, your internal voice. But as far as what others say, it can also be maybe someone that bullied you or spread a rumor that's lingering in the back of your mind, like I said, still hurtful. But I think the best advice for that is summed up in a quote. I don't know who this is from. I think it's like a movie or something. But and I'm gonna do it with a southern accent because I feel like it's meant to be read with one. Honey, people are gonna talk about you till the day you die. But it don't matter what they call you. It's what you answer to. You hear me? I like that. Doesn't matter what they call you. It's what you answer to. So, the power of yes and no. Let's talk about the power of no first. It's interesting because it is a very powerful word, but at the same time, we tend to use it when we feel the least powerful. When a person's world becomes powerless on the outside, all we know how to do is refer to the only power that we have on the inside, which is the power to say no, right? We see this in toddlers. When they're having tantrums, their favorite word, no, 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 right? And it's because even at that age, if upset, if feeling disempowered, powerless, we want to control our options and we want to stop our world and say, no, we're not going to do that. I'm not I'm not doing what you say, I'm doing what I want. Right. And the other thing is that no is a complete sentence. You don't have to explain that you can't do the meeting at noon because you're getting your hair done for the first time in a year. And you don't have to invent a reason for not doing something, right? Like I did that back in college. I would feel so guilty for like not being able to go even like a group meeting, which is super lame. But I felt the need to have a really good reason or else. And I just realized I'm like, no, I can't do it that day. Let's pick another or I won't be there. And that's fine, right? Um, but no is a complete sentence and you don't have to explain yourself. How many ladies out there have told that white lie, right? If there's some creep that's like hitting on you and you're like, I'm sorry, I actually have a boyfriend, even though you're like super single. But you're just doing it to avoid hurting their feelings. And it's like, no, you don't have to say why. If I say no to a guy at a bar and he asks why, I've already been participating in that conversation too long, right? That's a very strange thing to even ask. So why offer the answer, especially when it's a made up answer, right? I mean, mine, I'm married, so like I don't get hit on in bars anymore. But let's take the opposite of no. Conversely, what do we do when we're feeling powerful? We say yes and we invite opportunity, we invite abundance. Like I think about myself on Amazon purchases. I feel powerful, I get paid, I go buy things and I say yes to abundance, right? But it's feeling powerful because I'm going to make this decision and I know it's going to go well, right? So you're keeping the yes, the conscious and the subconscious actually on the same wavelength there. There's no more dissonance there. So now let's think about. Oh, hey, I just saw some comments. Eric is here. What's up, Eric? Hi. He said, as a plus size model himself, he understands that damage. Yes, absolutely. And as a trauma survivor, trust is all I have in my friendships and relationships. And I honor that now. So true. Yes. No idea my name. Oh, that breaks my heart. But you came to the right spot because yes, I have heard so much of that narrative and we hold the pens now. So our turn to write the story. And then Adam comments my Southern debutante accent. I thought it was great. No, not okay, whatever. Anyway, so the final thing in the word department I want you to think of is positive things that other people say about you that you need to remind yourself of instead of that evil voice in the back of your mind who was convincing you you were less than for any number of reasons, right? And so my friends, that for me, they're like, "Oh, you're really funny, you're kind, you're really strong." That really just means you've been through a lot of shit and you didn't die in my mind. But you need to give yourself that pep talk. Like write it down, visualize it, and internalize it. That vision of your best self, and revisit it often. Right? I am the queen of pep talks for other people. My friends, they call me for like two reasons. One, if they have a medical question, and two, if they need a pep talk. If they're just like sometimes in tears crying, it's just kind of like, I feel scared, build me back up. And I'm the queen of it. I'm really, really great, but I never do them for myself. I never do. I do a lot of the negative talk, that inner voice that my parents instilled into me. But I've now internalized my own little pep talk, and I have given myself mentally a pep talk. I don't think I've done it out loud yet. I think once I told myself to get my shit together, but when I needed a militant kind of pep talk. But um, yeah, just speaking to yourself the way that you would to a loving friend in your situation, and I think that's really powerful. I think the I think the most liberating word we can think of is humble. Now, if you look up humble in the dictionary, it actually says to be poor. But I would counter with saying this is actually the most empowering word for the rest of your life. Nothing is as powerful as understanding the meaning of this. To me, being humble is a quiet confidence. You know that you are everything and nothing at the same time, right? You don't need anyone else's approval. It's about freedom, and it's understanding that your value is nothing to do with your income or your status or your appearance or your abilities. And then you start to realize I'm humble. I'm just little old me, and I'm doing the best I can with what I've got, and I'm happy with it, right? So if you add to that humility, courage, and being centered and reflecting on what's happening in that given moment and how you want to respond, you can then do it from a place of wisdom instead of your ego that's, competing with people. I kind of want to call the person out, but I have a family member that routinely is too busy for everybody because he's a CEO and he's might have to put out fires, and I'm going to go across country to visit, but he could probably hang out some kind of deal. Like super important, and like I should bow down, for getting a moment with him. Um so we want to not do that. Anyway, so the truth is, and this is kind of comes with that wisdom perspective though, we're a little terrified, I think, to become like conscious and woke, um, in a sense, because the more we evolve and the more mindful we have to be, the more we evolve, the more mindful we have to be about words that we use, right? Because we know better. We're the grown-ups. We're the evolved adults here. And these first lifers, it's a funny term, I forget who told me that. Basically just unevolved grown-ups, people who are still immature, you know. And basically, sorry, I completely lost my place of notes. Oh yeah. But yeah, it's no longer okay to like hit below the belt, right? Because you are more evolved than that and you are better than that. And the reality is that if you do that and you sink to that level, you're going to feel like crap afterwards. Like odds are. So we have to really redefine our responsibilities to the whole of humanity, which is kind of a a big a big task, and it's still hard for me to this day in some instances, like to not quit back at a terrible person, or at the very least kind of like make fun of them to humble them, or I don't know. But because I consider myself spiritually evolved and I can see that they're motivated by some much deeper insecurity, I have to put a big old BO stamp on these ideas and remember to tap into my compassion instead, right? So that I can keep my peace and also just avoid putting unnecessary negativity into the world, right? That being said, I'm not going to witness, some gross injustice and not stand up for a person. But generally speaking, I just let bygones be bygones and don't pay them any mind, right? So mercy is a powerhouse. That mercy, that compassion, that detachment from their behavior because you understand it has nothing to do with you at all. So the only word that I would like to ban from our vocabulary is deserve. We think that we deserve money and success because either we've suffered or we've, worked ourselves to the bone, right? Like I could be, you know, angry that I ended up leaving the traditional like corporate medical field because I suffered. I spent my golden years, my 20s, studying 17 hours a day in school and then working 80 hours a week. And I had no social life. So to me, I deserved that good life once I finished, and I just realized for me, I was sort of pursuing it for the wrong reasons to begin with, but that's another story. But when we do these things, when we say that we deserve this or that we're entitled to something because of the bad day that I had, or because I just got dumped, or whatever thing may have happened, we then use that entitlement to pick up a drink or to overspend or to overeat. It's a word that gets you in trouble. And an interesting thing that my therapist explained to me is that when our heads and our hearts don't align, we jam things between them into our mouth to jam the circuits and distract the two from communicating. How do we do this? Food's the obvious one, but sex, alcohol, gambling, addictions, any form, but it's putting some external stimulus, usually physically, to the mouth. Obviously, there's other routes, but to disrupt that so they can no longer communicate. And you can just be entitled to drink and to do this destructive habit because it's been hard and it's been a bad day. I've done that myself. Heck yeah. Right? But it's just something that we have to be careful with, right? Everything that we have, I do believe that our birthright is to be present in joy and to love and have all these good blessings. But I think a big part of it is sort of becoming right with ourselves so that we're right with the world, and then the world rewards us in return. Maybe. Just hypothesizing. Checking in. Adam says, my pep talks to my friends will be much more effective if you believe them about yourself. Oh, I didn't really think that. I mean, my friends pretty much believe me. Fascinating about the deserve disruption. Yeah, definitely a weird. When she told me that, I was like, jam things in your mouth. I'm like, okay, well, eating, and then I was like, that could apply to this. That could smoking, alcohol. Like, yeah. But it literally disrupts that connection. So we do have an intuition though, and our body is designed to respond to it. And miracles can and do happen every day. Like we're intuitively wired to sense each other, but even deeper to sense sort of the fragility and the vulnerability of our fellow human beings, right? So we have the ability to sympathize, to empathize, to show compassion and love to others, or we have the ability to turn the other way. You can think about someone asking for change on the street, right? Tons of people will just walk right past, but many of them will not only walk past, but they will go out of their way to avoid the person. So they are again numbing themselves because it creates a discomfort within them. So I think this is also part of why humans can be so cruel to each other to an extent in just creating that physical separation. Um, I had trouble with that as a physician, creating a safe emotional barrier because I loved and care. I should say current tense. They're not my patients anymore, but I still love them. Love and care about them, and like I'm burying grandfathers and birthing newborns as a family physician, and that's a lot to not care about those people, right? And so, yeah, it's definitely a difficult, transition to have, but and to be such a profound feeler, right? It's a gift and it's a curse, but learning to manage it by first managing your own discomfort. Why does seeing someone asking for change make me feel shame? Is it because I said no, or because I see something of myself in them? Maybe that was them in the past. Who knows? Um, so that brings us to grace. That is one of my favorite words. My dad used to always joke, I should have named you Grace because I'm incredibly clumsy. My mom called me Sally Spiller, but I digress. So, grace. Um, sorry, I just thought about Christmas Vacation where they're at the table and the old lady's like, Grace, she died 30 years ago. Sorry. Anyway, grace. Like I talked about before, we've all been in a heated argument with somebody usually important to us, right? You don't get in a heated argument with a stranger unless it's about sports, right? um, but the entire time you're arguing, you know that you have that one ace up your sleeve that you know will hit that person below the belt and just absolutely crush them. Like a mic drop. Maybe it can be like, well, remember when you cheated on me, right? Remember when this, or well, you did this to me, and it can be any number of things. But then you begin, before you throw that out there, before you let your sympathetic fight or flight take over your rational, calm, centered, kind soul, you hear that voice in the back of your mind saying, you can't take those words back. Words are powerful. Growing up, because I was exposed to so much verbal abuse, I'm a lot more like, or I guess I should say, a lot less sensitive to it. I'm kind of just used to that existing. And because of that, my arguments growing up were always the ones with the ace up the sleeve because I was attacked and I had to be that scared tiger in the cage that even though I'm afraid on the inside, my words are venom. I'm spitting venom at you. Um, but as an adult, I can see, that's a maladaptive pattern. And I understand that, when I told my dad I wished he died instead, I shouldn't have said that. It was messed up. And, you go back and you realize like there are no amount of apologies because you still said it, which means at some point, even if in that 1 nanosecond, he meant it. Right? And do you ever regret taking time to cool down when you do? It can be in a physical person to person argument. It can be in an email, it can be in a text message, even by phone, where you just say, like, can we take a few minutes and I'll call you back, right? But taking that time to cool down is, I think, a gift. You're giving yourself the gift of space, which gives you perspective to then give others and yourself grace. Space creates grace. I like that. I'm sure it's been said before. I'm sure it's like a hashtag. But yeah, giving yourself space to give grace. And when you take those few breaths and you realize, okay, I'm actually a lot more powerful because I can hurt them and I am choosing not to, right? It's the whole they go low, we go high thing. It's you will never regret doing the right thing. Well, you sometimes regret taking the high road, but not often. Not often. I would dare say you regret verbally lashing out or lashing out in any way prematurely before you have a moment to see a situation clearly. You are far more powerful when you have this discernment, right, between productive and unproductive. Say grace the blessing. Thanks, babe, for getting the reference. Yes, so this is true empowerment, and grace is a sacred power, really, that saves us from our worst instincts and gives us opportunities to act on behalf of others and to be there for them. Um, And so it's really just kind of letting your intuition guide you. You can call that spiritual guidance, divine guidance, and it can be religious, but it's a lot more about your soul that's guiding you, right? We say the universe, and the universe provides, and the universe always has your back, but the universe is a reflection. Like they are rubber, you are glue. Whatever you say bounces off and it sticks to you forever. The universe is just reflecting back. So if it's not giving you something, look internally to what block or resistance you still have, subconscious or not, that's preventing it. Open yourself up to that highest self and surrendering. So yeah, that's really the whole premise of a spiritual journey, I think. It's how we become something greater than ourselves on behalf of everyone else. Like it's making the human journey a better place for the earth, not even just mankind, right? It's the animals and nature and the planet itself. Um, being more aware and more conscientious in our actions. So this is really how we become an instrument of transforming the whole of life. It's by doing it on behalf of others for everybody else. And then you come along with it, of course. But this enables your inner senses to really awaken, for you to become more in tune with the world around you. And this is not like the purpose of this, in my mind anyway, is not to help you succeed, but to help you discover your inner nature of who you really are, what is driving you, so that you can tap into your own deeper potential. So in terms of this sacred power, we talked about it a bit with chakras, but it is an active agent of transformation. That connectivity, that knowingness, and that deep wisdom that you have when you are at peace with yourself and where you are in life. And it's sort of the rising tide lifts all boats, right? Like we give this energy to others. And an example that I think of here is miracles, right? One of my favorite quotes I've heard is that in life, you can either choose to view everything as a miracle or nothing as a miracle. It's one or the other, right? So it's like even the most mundane post-it can be really cute and you can look at it, or nothing impresses you, right? I'm sure we've all known people that are not impressed with anyone or anything. But in terms of miracles, there's a story, and you may have heard this because I'm retelling this, but there was a man driving a motorcycle late at night during the winter. And as he gets on, he thinks to himself, this is probably not a good idea. And lo and behold, he ends up hitting some black ice. He hits a deer, ends up breaking both of his legs, and he and the deer are in the middle of the highway around this bend, like a blind curve, right? And so he can't move. His legs are broken, and he's laying there on this road thinking he's going to get run over by a car zipping around the bend. So the man begins to cry, and he hears footsteps in the frozen snow, and he can't see anything because he's got blood in his eyes, but he hears a woman's voice, and suddenly his head is in her lap. And she says, "Don't worry, an ambulance is on the way." And so he's like, "Oh, thank God." She calls an ambulance. But when they arrived, they happened to be in the area. No one had called. There were no footprints in the snow. There was no woman standing there with him. And that changed his entire life. But I don't know why I'm sharing another person's miracle story, because I've got some great angel miracle moments myself. I always tell people I have like 9 lives at least, because I mean, I say I should be dead now just on how close I've come so many times, but by the grace of God, I'm not, I guess. But um, let's see, the first near death experience, I was driving late at night to an ex boyfriend's house during med school. I hit a deer, hit my head on the windshield because I had been rushing. And so I had not yet put on my seatbelt. So I hit the windshield and was unconscious for God knows how many hours in kind of like a wooded area. Like it was remote, but not remote. I don't know. Anyway, so thank God, they ended up discovering me, but I feel like I almost died and came back, if you will. Like it was the most bizarre thing. And then there was a Ryanair flight that I took when I was studying abroad in Spain. It was just to Barcelona, so like a 30-minute flight. And I had organized this whole group to go, and it was like 10 of us from the program. And so we all get on this cheap flight, and first it's delayed for like 8 hours or something insane for weather, right? It's like storming and it's terrible, and we're all complaining and throwing a fit and like essentially forcing them to take us up in dangerous conditions is what it came down to. And so we're in the sky, and basically we hit turbulence, but it was more like the movie turbulence than like the rough air that is very common. Like I'm talking, my head hit the ceiling because I wasn't buckled. Seatbelts I wasn't on. I do love seatbelts. But I wasn't buckled at the time. Head hit the ceiling. My purse flew 3 rows behind me. When I got back down, I'm like white knuckling it, and it really felt as though our plane fell out of the sky. Like there was just this massive amount of like shaking it was at least 30 seconds. Like it was not a 2-second thing. Like I would say a minute or 2 of just complete chaos, like things going all over the place. And all of a sudden, I'm at the time, my hands on my ears in the fetal position on the floor, rocking and humming to myself, which I later learned is actually a meditation, because it mimics the circumstances of when you're in the womb, like with your mother, like your voice when your ears are plugged sounds like your mother's would. And so I'm doing that. And all of a sudden, I swear to God, I was like praying and like getting right with God, but also a little mad because I was like, I have not even gotten married. I have not had kids, like not even a doctor, nothing. Haven't even graduated college yet, man. But it was as though like angel hands on a cloud just whoop, because it stopped out of nowhere. It wasn't like it improved. It was just like, wow, 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 wow. And suddenly, and the hilarious part in hindsight, not at the time, but the flight attendants were like, hey, how's everybody doing? Like hair all messed up. It was ridiculous. But yeah, I truly, 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 truly knew in that moment that was it for me. So yeah, when you have enough moments like that, you're like, okay, there's got to be somebody out there looking for me. And for me, I'm like, okay, it's my mom. I lost her at 17, but at least she keeps saving my life when I do dumb shit. So let's share a positive miracle as we wrap up then. When we did lose my mom, I was 17. I have an older brother and a younger brother. And we both got together after the memorial service, and we went to Wilmington, North Carolina, which was her favorite city. She loves the beach, always planned to move there once we got out of school. So I was like, we should go to Wilmington. She got cremated. She didn't want us to sort of be like attached to a grave or a body when it's a spirit. And so I said, let's sprinkle her ashes in the ocean in Wilmington. And it was great. We're like, okay, we'll do that. The problem is at 17, you don't really know much about planning. And this is way before like Google. Well, Google Maps existed, but not like smartphones and stuff. Um, so I just Googled on my computer a place you can rent boats, and we drove there. And it was kind of more like a boat dump yard at that time. They had apparently closed down years before. But it was an older married couple that I just happened to find them in what I'm just now realizing was probably their house, not the office, which I walked into. Anyway, so I explained the story, and I said, and the man is like, I'm sorry, but we closed down. We don't really do that. We don't rent the boats. And of course, I'm like, okay, I understand. I'm fine. That's okay. And so we all three sort of walk back towards the car, and I he must have talked to his wife because she was really like, you could tell she was touched. And he runs after us, and he's like, I don't have a boat you can rent, but I'll take you out there if you want to go now. And I was like, oh my God, yes, yes, yes. And you might think that's the miracle, not quite. I mean, that was a miracle in and of itself, but he drove us out to the middle. And on our way there, we saw a mother dolphin with three babies. I've never seen a dolphin in my life in the wild. Like I I've been on actual dolphin cruises in Florida, total ripoff, never seen a dolphin, like a dozen of them, seriously. And on this 5-minute boat ride just out of the sound, we see a mom and not one but two but three babies. Like I don't even know if dolphins can have triplets, but it was just, I mean, it was the most magical experience I've ever had in my life. And I asked him too. I'm like, "Do you see a lot of dolphins here?" And he's like, "That's a first for me too." So it was pretty magical and special, and he changed our lives with that action, and it's something we'll always remember. And another little quickie, since we have a couple minutes, was on my best friend's wedding day. She wanted to get married outside, planned it her whole life. And of course, what happens? Rain on the wedding day. But not just bad, like not rain, bad rain, like dark clouds. Pretty sure there was thunder and lightning, like black sky, horrible, muddy ground. Like it, it had disaster written all over it. But the maid of honor, who she's like a professional maid of honor. She's so cool that was like her seventh time doing it because everyone loves her. She's everyone's best friend. Anyway, she lost her parents too, both of them actually, even more recently than I did. And she and I sort of got off to the side and were, you know, planning for the crisis of like, what is our plan B? And we both kind of looked at each other and we were like, this is gonna sound crazy, but like, do you want to just like pray to our parents and like talk to our angels and just like see what we can do, like an anti-rain dance type of thing spiritually? And I'm like, yeah, hell yeah, I do. Like, I don't even want to think about plan B because ain't no mo. So we like, kind of got together and we're like, Meredith, we're gonna give it 30 more minutes. It's gonna be okay. We've figured out what we're gonna do, which was bluffing, kind of. We're like, we have an idea of what we can do if not, but let's give it 30 more minutes. The forecast is looking like there's a chance. Within, I want to say 5-6 minutes, we look outside and there was a double rainbow amid like black clouds, just double rainbow. And the clouds are just like, it's as though there are hands there pulling them back to show the rainbow. And I was just like, well, damn, I guess your marriage is blessed. You'll be married forever, huh? So that was really special. So choosing to see small things that, negative Nancy's might label as coincidence, and find some meaning if you want to, find some joy if you want. And ride it, you ride the wave of that, you know? Um, and just think about how wonderful things could be if you didn't have your old story, the one that someone else wrote for you. If you were free from everything holding you back from healing, right? And being empowered is not about speaking your truth. It's about learning to tell the truth and to pursue it. So there's a real sense of mastery and empowerment in honoring your pain instead of masking it, instead of jamming those circuits with drug or alcohol or risky behavior. Feeling is a fast track way to work through that, right? Acknowledging that the energy of a certain type of trauma is staggering. It takes so much energy to harbor that, right? Remembering our anchors that we talked about in our last class, that our subconscious has to process through every single one of those things before you can even make a decision. So a lot of us hide our trauma because we think we're protecting other people. I did this my entire life, seriously, until I met Adam. I don't like to burden them. I don't like to be a downer. Um, and I was actually energetically and spiritually harboring that, and would have passed that on to my children and my family if I didn't stop that pattern. Because the reality is you can't hide your trauma. You're actually doing a kind of crappy job, right? It's that whole conscious versus subconscious. Consciously, for years, I was in denial. Like when my aunt told me that I had PTSD, I literally laughed. I was like, yeah, okay. Because on paper, I had a great life, right? But you cannot suppress your trauma and deny it consciously when you know subconsciously you have not yet dealt with it. It will catch up to you. um, and also recognizing that suppressing your trauma also makes you hide some of your gifts with it. So I'm just encouraging you, yeah, to balance everything out. And today's healing device is going to be cats because I ran out of physical things to share with you guys. But because last week we talked about chakras and energy healing, I wanted to share just a couple really quick fun facts. So when cats purr, they actually release endorphins, and it creates the same effect on humans. So this lowers your stress hormones, your cortisol. This stimulates healing of tissues. It lowers your blood pressure, and it can help you cope with illness. There is a measurable frequency, so like a vibration of those purrs, and that is between 25 and 140 hertz. And that is the same wavelength that has been shown to aid healing broken bones, joint, tendons, and wound healing. So that's pretty awesome. So let's talk about like topical treatment then. When they're laying on your belly, you're activating your heart and your solar chakra plexi. I don't know. Cats laying at your head at night can actually help ease headaches or migraines. There are even cultures that believe that this like a cat at your head while you sleep can protect against nightmares. So go share those fun facts. But first and foremost, empower yourself, write your narrative, and yeah, I'm here every step of the way. And I'm going to go ahead and share the link to the Warm Line. This is the most incredible resource. That Promise Resource Network began, I think, in the beginning of the pandemic. So this is the Warm Line, 24/7. It is free. That is confidential. And you will have a listening ear on the other end of the phone. That number is 833-390-7728. I highly encourage it. And if you just want to know more about our programs, feel free to give us a call at the welcome desk. That's 704-390-7709. All right. Thank you all for tuning in. I love you all. Sending you love and light and blessings. Take care.